Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we return to talking about MTV Decoded, which is of course hosted by Francesca Ramsey. They've got a new season of videos coming out this month, and I don't think most people even know about it. People probably don't even care anymore. In fact, the videos I've done trying to cover Franny and Decoded again are not getting much attention. Like, I think this meme is pretty much dead, but I thought we'd try it anyway. I mean, they've had terrible arguments as usual, and it's still pretty interesting to me to see that they're still trying and failing like pretty miserably. Like, no one's really watching the show anymore. It's on this small MTV Impact channel. It's not getting a lot of views on anything. And specifically, like this season, it's all about them bashing cops. Like, you can see we've covered a couple of the videos before, but basically it's like why it's not about good cops versus bad cops. This one says why prosecuting police is impossible. This one says 3 Hollywood myths about police. And this one says racist origins of police. That's what we're going to go over today. And as you can see by this thumbnail already, this is classic MTV Decoded fashion. So they've got a picture of a badge, a police badge, seemingly from a present day police. And then next to it is like a black and white photo. It's not even a photo. It's like a drawing rendition from like 100, 200 years ago. Obviously, it's like a white guy hitting a black guy. It's trying to show that cops are racist. But the thing right out the gate, like before we even get into it, I mean, this isn't related. Like, this is like time traveling. I don't get how there was some racism 200 years ago and that means all cops are racist now. Like, there's not really a direct through line there. Like, pointing out that something racist happened 100, 200 years ago doesn't prove that everything is racist now. But that's where Franny's going to go with this. Like, she specifically says straight up, all cops are racist. Like, 99 to 100%. Like, that's a quote from her. So without further ado, let's go ahead and see how bad this is going to get.
Modern policing just took a DNA test. Turns out it's 99 to 100% racist. Previously on Decoded, we talked about how the cops don't exactly spend their time keeping us safe, despite how often they tell us that's their job. Here's the TLDR. Addressing violent crime makes up a very small percentage of police work. Most crimes go unsolved, and the Supreme Court affirmed that officers don't actually have a constitutional obligation to intervene.
Okay, she's going really fast. She's like gish galloping us, but let's not overlook the first thing she said was modern policing is 99 to 100% racist. So that's worthy of addressing right away because I mean, it's absolutely insane. Like, all the cops aren't racist. I mean, virtually all the cops are not racist. Like, keep in mind, all the cops aren't white either. Like, there's a mix of all kinds of races. Like, cops typically represent the races of their area. So if our country is 13% black, that means 13% of the cops are black. And then there's also percentages that are, you know, Hispanic, Asian, like all of that. There's all demographics in there. And they're not all racist. It's totally insane. It's a totally brash assumption that she's starting off with. And then she goes to these other points that are just totally silly too. I mean, she talks about here, this is a TLD.
Addressing violent crime makes up a very small percentage of police work. Most crimes go unsolved, and the Supreme Court affirmed that officers...
So she says cops are spending 4% going after violent crime because there's other crimes out there, I guess. And then she says most crimes aren't solved. Like, that's a reason to remove the cops. Like, that means you need more cops. That means you need better policing. Like, the whole idea here seems to be like defund the police or bash the police, but I don't think they really have answers or an idea or agenda. Their whole thing is just straight up, let's call the cops racist. And that's the whole thing that's making this whole video just totally silly. I mean, I don't understand the whole anti-cop thing. Like, I think it comes back to just not liking authority figures, like having poor upbringing, like their parents didn't teach them to respect authority, or as Cartman from South Park would say, respect my authority. You know, like, these guys just hate anyone's in charge. And that's why they can't handle interactions with the police. That's why they're not doing well at school, because they don't like teachers. And it's also hurting them in the job market. Like, you can't get a good job if you can't listen to your boss. Like, if you can't follow directions properly, it's going to lead to all kinds of problems like this.
Officers don't actually have a constitutional obligation to intervene if you're in danger. They're about as legally bound to your well-being as the stranger you asked to watch your laptop at the coffee shop. So what exactly are the police here to do, and how did we end up where we are now? Well, to answer those questions, we have to look at the history of policing and the institutions that provided a blueprint for modern law enforcement. And
so there's that picture. This drawing from 200 years ago is supposed to be related to modern policing. Like, she makes this leap. She makes it sound like it makes sense. Like, oh, it's like, okay, this picture is legit 200 years ago. This is 1820. You got 1920. We're in 2020. This is 200 years ago. And she thinks this is somehow relevant, like related. I mean, it's fine if you want to go down memory lane. Like, I understand, you could get to the root of the problem by maybe like doing a little research, but she's going way too far back. I mean, you could go back 50 years and study the cops and still get a good idea of why we're at where we are today. But the truth is, they don't want to go to that point. They don't want to go just to the 1970s. Like, things weren't racist enough. They want to take us back 200 years, time travel, to make us all look like racist and offensive because there was bad things that happened to black people in the 1800s.
And to all of our "what about the white people" commenters, don't worry. Unless you were uber wealthy, the police were initially formed to suppress your rights too. When we look back as far as the 1700s, policing has largely been centered around protecting property and maintaining a status quo shaped by white supremacy and capitalism. And that
Whoa, throwing white supremacy in there. Okay, so cops are meant to defend white supremacy and capitalism, which those are two no-no words to them for sure. And I mean, no one's arguing that supremacy of any kind is good, except there are a lot of people on her side who are fans of black supremacy. Like, other kinds of supremacy is fine. Like, having pride about other races is okay. But if you say you're happy that you're white, or you like your white friends or family, like, that means you're a supremacist and a racist, according to them, according to their bad logic and their terribly flawed anti-white behavior. Like, these people hate us. Like, she really, really hates white people. That's why she has a whole series of videos bashing us all the time. And that's why we have to defend them each time. I mean, I know it gets repetitive. No one even cares about Franny anymore. MTV Decoded is totally dead, but we have to beat the dead horse, because otherwise they're just going to keep saying all this anti-white stuff. And then the other thing is, capitalism is not a bad thing. Like, they try to put that out there and they bash capitalism and act like it's evil. It's like, no, communism is evil. Dictatorships and authoritarians and fascism, those are bad systems. Capitalism is what built this country. It's what built this country and all the greatest countries in the world. It's about freedom. It's about the ability to earn and to have a ladder. You can work your way up the ladder. You could get rich in this country. And that's because of things like this. It's because of our institutions. It's because of our great, great leaders and our people who founded this nation and made it into this wonderful place it is now. But Franny doesn't agree with that. She thinks everyone in the past is racist. And this, again, just goes back to her not liking white people, hating authority figures, being uncomfortable too. She's uncomfortable about her past. She can't handle the fact that there were some bad things that happened to black people 200 years ago. Same things with all people, actually. You could go back in any race or group of people. Bad things happened in the past. Like, they weren't the only ones that were in chains. Like, all sorts of people were put in chains and sold into labor camps. Like, that happened all over the world. But for some reason, African Americans like Franny, they cannot handle it. They are just so weak. They cannot handle it. That's why they lash out in the present.
That hasn't changed much over the last few centuries. Policing got its start regionally, from slave patrols in the South to Union strike breakers in the North and the Texas Rangers in the early Western US. And as history shows, the police have been pretty terrible everywhere. So let's get started with one of the most horrifying ancestors of modern law enforcement: slave patrols. During the early 1700s, plantation owners in the South developed slave patrols, the first form of law enforcement that resembles the police we see today. The thing
Oh my God, this lady, dude, this lady, she just loves talking about slavery. I mean, I was just calling it out before that she can't cope with it. She can't handle this history. And that's why she always brings it up. Like, she's still focusing on it like so much. Like, this is something that most people learn in like 8th grade history class. You learn about this issue and then you learn about the next issue and you move on with your life. You're like, okay, we've studied this era of history. Now let's talk about World War II era. Next let's talk about the American versus Vietnam War. Like, people move on, but she never moved on. She's been in this 8th grade mindset. She's been terribly shook by this for years. Obviously, I mean, she's a grown-ass woman. She hasn't been in school for 10 years at least. That was probably college time too. Like, so maybe like 15, 16 years ago, she learned about this and she's still obsessed with it. It just shows she can't cope. She's like really, really triggered. And she brings this up like this has anything to do with modern day cops. Like, okay, there used to be some people that were hired to make sure these workers didn't run away. I mean, it's a bad situation. I'm not defending that. Like, that was terrible that those people were chained up, just like there were people chained up in other countries at the time, like all across the world. This is still happening in the present in some places too. Let's not forget there's virtual slave labor in places like Qatar. They're building soccer stadiums in the desert for God knows what reason, but no one cares about that. We want to go back 200 years and shame America and call us all racist because you don't like cops. You don't like people telling you what to do. And you want to tell everyone what to do. Like, that's what Franny loves to do. She loves bossing everyone else around. But for some reason, no one else can boss people around, especially people that are hired to do it and there to protect us. These people are supposed to stop criminals. The cops aren't the bad guys.
Slave patrols restricted black people's freedom of movement by employing lower and middle class white men who, armed with whips and guns, would patrol from sunup to sundown. According to historians, the duties of patrollers included apprehending runaways, monitoring black movement, breaking up gatherings of black people, randomly searching slave quarters, inflicting impromptu punishments, and suppressing insurrections. I wonder where the ideas for programs like stop and frisk and no-knock warrants could have possibly come from.
Okay, that was a loose attempt to tie it to the present. And it's just so weak. I mean, 200 years, and she thinks that they're inspired by this stuff, like the stop and frisk and the no-knock warrants. Like, these are just modern policing strategies. Some of them are effective, some of them aren't. Some of them have bad results. Like, no one's denying that, but that loose connection, it's just not there, Franny. Like, I know you think this is so relevant. Like, oh, there were people in chains 200 years ago, and they hired people to keep them from running off. Like, oh, that means they're cops. That's how cops come from. They come from this. It's totally absurd. Like, there were cops before this. Like, cops happened for generations before. Like, there are officers of the law in little camps. Like, the Native Americans would have someone who's in charge of keeping things in line. Like, they'd have a little leader. You know, the Romans had the soldiers and the military. That was like their form of police. Like, this has been happening for like generations, like for millions of years. So I don't know how you could tie it just to that, like, and why she gets to go back to this era and pretend everything is related to slavery. It's just totally absurd. It's silly. And I think this is really pathetic. And I can see why her show is just totally dying off and why no one wants to watch even my videos about this. Like, this is the same thing she did 4 years ago. She's been doing the same thing every year on schedule, just totally everything is related to slavery for her. Everything is related to white people are racist, black people can do no wrong, never ever admit they'll do anything wrong. And that's why this show is terrible. That's why Francesca can't get any other work. Like, that's why she's been fired from other shows. Her pilot got canceled. That's why she got a divorce. Like, she's a bitter, angry woman, hates white people, has a lot of terrible thoughts in her heart, and just can't cope with her history. That about wraps things up. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Also, hit that like button to get this video shared. Subscribe if you're new, and check out our second channel, NoBS News. Until next time, have a great day.